Okay, folks, it has been a while since I've done just an actual video on comics. I've done a lot of shorts and I've done some live streams, but a comic book video, it's been a while. So let's go ahead and do one on ISOM and the secret of great covers. Now, here are the 8 covers for ISOM number 1 on the left and ISOM number 2 on the right. And one of these covers is a mass market cover, whereas the other 3 are limited printing covers. The limited printing, they're limited to a certain number of issues, and after that, they will not be printed any longer. And then the mass market cover is the one that's going to be printed indefinitely. Now, Eric July's made some remarks recently about the mass market covers, and this is not an exact quote, but what he said goes something like this. It's important to get the mass market covers right because those are the covers that will be printed indefinitely, and that means those are the covers that readers in years to come will associate with the books. When you think of ISOM number 1, you're going to think of its mass market cover. When you think of ISOM number 2, you're going to think of its mass market cover. Now, again, that's not an exact quote. I'm not a member of his channel, so when I hear him say something on a live stream, I only have a limited amount of time to be able to capture that. And I think in this case, I heard him say it, but his live stream had already closed out, and so I was not able to go back and get the exact words. Anybody who's on his channel who sees me online and wants to gift somebody a membership, feel free to pass one my way. But I ain't paying for that right now. So this is not an exact quote, but I do believe he said this a couple of times now, and that this does capture what he's thinking about the mass market covers. And by the way, I'm not disagreeing with this. I actually think this is actually pretty accurate. You want the mass market cover to be something that's going to be representative of your book. And that goes along with something that I like to call the prime directive of cover art. And that is a comic book cover should not be a poster, but should rather be an iconic representation of what is going on inside the book. Now, what do I mean by iconic representation? Well, an iconic representation is kind of like, it may not necessarily reflect exactly what's going on inside the book, but it is the essence of what's going on inside the book. For example, Superman, World of New Krypton, number 4. We show Green Lantern and Superman about to have a knockdown, drag-out fight. Does that actually happen in the book? No, it does not. There's a lot of talking that goes on in the book, expressing the conflict between the characters that exists now that the bottle city of Kandor has been expanded and its inhabitants have all moved to a world of their own creation called New Krypton. And this planet full of fully powered Kryptonians is now a threat to the universal order. And it is a threat that Green Lantern has come to check on. You know, you can't just have a whole planet full of Supermen and not expect the peacekeepers of the universe, the guardians of the universe, the Green Lantern Corps being their peacekeeping force, not to, check up on them and see whether or not they're a threat to the galaxy's stability. So, you do find these two characters coming into conflict, but never comes to the point where they're coming to blows. However, to put two characters on the cover that are just talking it out between each other would be boring, whereas you have a much more exciting representation of their conflict in this cover. So I think that's acceptable, that even though this doesn't happen within the book, it at least expresses what's within the book in an exciting way. And that's important because boring covers don't sell comics. Exciting covers do. Let me give you an example of some boring covers leading up to an exciting cover. This is the first cover from the run of J. Michael Straczynski and John Romita Jr. on Amazing Spider-Man. This started off a new storyline, and what do you see on the cover? You see on the cover something you've seen time and time and time before. I mean, you can actually hear the Spider-Man theme song when you look at this. Does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches crooks just like flies. He's literally doing that on the cover. This tells us nothing. We're getting nothing about what's in the book. It's just boring. You look at it and it's like, okay, there's Spider-Man. He's caught a bunch of crooks, and okay, why should I buy this? And the answer is that you've given me no reason. Let's take a look at the next cover. Amazing Spider-Man 31, the second issue. We've got Peter Parker teaching a science class. Wow, doesn't that just spark just feelings of excitement in you? No, it doesn't. Not at all. good Lord. I mean, if couldn't be trying to bore us more if you tried. Now, this cover of Amazing Spider-Man 32, I mean, it's not bad. It gives kind of this Aztec representation of a spider on the wall, and then you have Spider-Man being his own representation of a spider on the wall. It's cute, but you absorb it in a second and then you're done. And then it's like, why should I buy the book? And there's no reason given. But then, oh my goodness. When I saw this cover, Amazing Spider-Man 33, featuring Spider-Man and the new character Ezekiel on the cover. I mean, I don't even know the character's name, but I already want to know, who is this guy? Why is he clinging to the wall the same way that Spider-Man does? Does he have Spider-Man's powers? Is he? That's not Uncle Ben, is it? All of these questions pop up in my mind, and suddenly I'm like, wow, I got to know what's going on in this book. Well, here's the real shame of it all. The character of Ezekiel here, he was introduced all the way back here. I mean, he was front and center in Amazing Spider-Man number 30. And why didn't they put him on the cover then? Why would you save your most exciting cover for 3 issues later, so that I would have to go back to Amazing Spider-Man number 30 and go buy that and try to find 30 and 32, 31, 32, and try to recollect the series? Why would you hide this from us? This is showing clearly what's going on in the book, and this is not. This is not. This is not. You could have had me all the way back here if you had just given me a cover that was worth a damn. So the prime directive of cover art is that the comic book cover should not just be a poster. These 3 covers are just posters. They don't tell you anything about what's going on in the book, but they should rather be an iconic representation of what is going on inside the book. Is this actually happening where they're both sitting next to each other and talking, or posing and stuff? No, but it's showing that these 2 characters have come together, and it's showing what Ezekiel can do. It's making us curious. It's making us wonder. It's making us wonder what's between the front cover and the back cover of the comic. Now, the only exception to this rule is first issues. A first issue can be a poster shot, and maybe anniversary issues. And the reason I say that is because I have to admit, when I was an early comic book collector, one of the first Iron Man comics I ever picked up was Iron Man number 100. And why did I pick up Iron Man number 100? Well, because it was the 100th issue. I assumed important things were going to be happening in there. And, look at that cover. The cover pops out pretty well. So the excitement that's generated by the fact that you got the 100th issue, you just assume that, you're going to have some climactic action going on in there. And you've got this poster shot of, acknowledging the 100 issue achievement. That's fairly cool. I mean, I still think there's ways to do it that would make it better. I mean, I'm remembering Fantastic Four number 200, where they still showed, Reed Richards versus Doctor Doom to the death, they always say. But then, of course, you've also got issues like Amazing Spider-Man 300, and this, of course, went on to be one of the most famous Spider-Man comics of all time on account of the Spider-Man versus Venom conflict. Now, granted, you could have showed Spider-Man versus Venom on the cover, but, for an anniversary issue, this does pop out, and it does, it does make you somewhat curious, at least in the sense that it's apparently this was also a 25th anniversary issue on top of that, and it's issue number 300, so, this is like throwing that completely in your face. So, anniversary issues, I still prefer to have more information on the cover than just this, but I have to acknowledge that when you use these things sparingly, they do have a tendency to sell the book. Fortunately, like comic book companies these days like to say, oh, it's our 5th anniversary issue, meaning it's issue number 5. It's like, no, guys, you can't do that. You can't do that even with issue number 12. I mean, issue number 25 is even pushing it. I mean, come on. If you haven't made a run of 50 issues, you haven't really accomplished an anniversary. So, let's look at some really notable failures of the prime directive of comic book art, or cover art. One of my favorite failures is this cover by Phil Jimenez, who really should have known better because he did draw the interiors to this issue as well. So here is a picture of the Beast, and if you are an X-Men reader and you have the Beast as one of your favorite characters, you're going to think, oh, I'm gonna open the cover and I'm gonna see a story about the Beast, right? Nope. Beast is not in the book. He's not even shown once in the book. Can you imagine how bait and switch this is? I mean, yeah, it's a picture of the Beast, but you just brought in all the readers who might like the Beast and then shown them a comic book that had nothing to do with the Beast. I can't think of a worse betrayal of comic book readers' trust than giving you a cover and then having the book be nothing about that. That's just sad. Likewise, here's a Tony Harris cover of Fantastic Four number 505. Now, in this case, we do have the Human Torch in the book. He's part of the Fantastic Four. You would hope he's in the book, but in any case, he is actually in the book. Problem is that he's flying through New York City, and New York City is not in the book. This whole story, this issue, takes place in Latveria, the country of Dr. Doom. Now, the reason I think this is such a gross violation of the reader's trust is that this is a story that the reader might actually want to read. Why? Because, if you are interested in Dr. Doom as much as you're interested in the Fantastic Four, and you know that the Human Torch is, say, flying through Latveria as opposed to flying through New York, that might make you wonder, what is the Human Torch doing in Latveria, and why does it seem like, people are cheering him as opposed to afraid of him, and, why is it that he's able to fly safely through Latveria? It doesn't make any sense, and that would give the reader the curiosity to actually open the book and start taking a read. But just this tells us nothing. This just says, yeah, it's about the Fantastic Four, and that's it. And that is what a lot of Marvel comics came to be like when in the era when these covers were all the rage. You would see covers like this everywhere. For example, Spider-Girl. Spider-Girl had about 5 covers in a row. They were just like, here's Spider-Girl, here's Spider-Girl, here's Spider-Girl, here's Spider-Girl, here's Spider-Girl. And I swear to God, I was reading this series at the time, and it was boring me out of my mind to see these covers on the shelves. Because all you're doing is like, yep, here's the latest issue of Spider-Girl. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to read it, but you're kind of turning me off just by boring the hell out of me with these covers. And then look at Iron Man. This is the Extremis arc. This is the cover art from the Extremis arc of Iron Man. This is one of the most impactful Iron Man arcs of all time. This is where Tony Stark basically infected himself with a computer virus that allowed him to take control of technology. And you've got Iron Man, and Iron Man, and Iron Man, and Iron Man, and Iron Man. I'm practically falling asleep just looking at these pictures, because even though they're impressive, it's impressive artwork, none of these give me any idea of what's going on in the book. And if you are somebody who has read Iron Man before and you've since dropped the title, each of these covers has to give you a way to get back into the book, and none of them do. None of them are going to attract a previous reader of Iron Man back to the title. And if you once read Spider-Girl and now you had since dropped Spider-Girl, how is anything about these covers going to attract you back into reading Spider-Girl? So, yeah, these represented fail after fail after fail to me. I actually got a chance to talk with Joe Quesada from Marvel Comics, who was the editor-in-chief at the time. He and I had a 2-hour lunch after I paid for the privilege by winning a comic book legal defense fund auction. He came down to Texas, and we went to a hotel across the street from the convention, and we wound up the service at the hotel was so miserably slow that a 1-hour lunch turned into a 2-hour lunch, for which I was grateful. I don't know if he was, because I complained to him about covers like this and how these covers are really a betrayal of the long-standing reader's interest. You don't want to get a book with Beast on the cover and find out he's not in the book. You don't want to see the Human Torch flying through New York and then open the book to find out he's in Latveria. And you know what Joe Quesada's response was? Who cares? Which would make him a perfect employee for the Rippaverse, don't you think? Isn't this apathy matching Eric July's level of apathy over all the critiques that I've levied at him so far? In fact, speaking of the Rippaverse, let's jump into looking at the covers for ISOM #1. All right, so the first three covers, A, B, and C, for ISOM #1 are shown here. And let's take a look at each of these in turn. These were the first three covers that were immediately available when the ISOM #1 campaign started. The first cover is pretty damn well perfect. This is a iconic representation not only of what's going in the book, but it also has that #1 feel of a poster showcasing the character. So this has all of the elements you would want to see on a comic book cover. You've got the main character featured front and center. You've got the people who he's going to become in conflict with them just behind him in notable positions. You have a display of his strength in the pile of unconscious guards below. You've got some scenes from A Day in the Life up above, and him looking out at from the cover at you. This is really a great cover for #1. I believe this was done by Turnian. It's freaking awesome. Now we have also cover B. This is by Cliff Richards, if I'm not mistaken, and this is ISOM fighting the secondary character Yaira, and it's a decent looking cover. I mean, it shows the fact that they do come into conflict in the book, even though neither of them are in costume. But again, iconic representation means that you can take some liberty with that. You can have ISOM fight Yaira as opposed to Avery Silman fight Yaira, and Yaira in her day clothes. So this is actually a pretty decent cover. It's a little bit understated considering that this really isn't the main conflict of the book that's featured here. It's really more to showcase Yaira than it is anything else. And the same goes for the next cover, which is the Alpha Core cover. Avery never fights Alpha Core in the book at all. In fact, there is no conflict between Alpha Core and Avery in the book at all. So this is really a misleading cover more than it is an iconic cover. You're showing a conflict that just doesn't exist. And so I would be very critical of this cover. I mean, it's really there to showcase Alpha Core, and I think we all know that. But and moreover, I mean, I keep looking at Avery's where his center of gravity is compared to where his leg is, and I keep thinking he's about to like fall over, because unless he like plants his foot like way out here, he's not going to get the traction to throw that punch. He's just going to wind up falling right over on the ground. But in any case, it's a decent cover, but at the same time, you can tell it's just there to spotlight the Alpha Core. It's not really there to represent what's going on in the book. So those are the three covers that we were given at the outset. And so the cover that I myself went with was, of course, cover A, because that to me was the perfect cover for a first issue. It definitely iconically represents the character in a way that also explains what's going on in the book, who he's going to have conflicts with in the book, definitely gives various elements of Avery's character and powers. I just thought it was a perfect overall cover. Now, they did come out with a fourth cover later on. This was the Creators Edition of ISOM #1, and this is offered exclusively to the Ultra Mac level of Eric July's subscribers. So there are various Mac levels that you can purchase. I think this is one of the most expensive tiers, but if you did get this tier, the Ultra Mac tier, you had access to a free copy of ISOM #1. And that was of this Creators Edition cover. And the Creators Edition cover was not just this drawing, but it was also had kind of a three-dimensional feel to it, where these rocks, so these pieces of debris, actually had some substance to them, where you could kind of feel them on the cover. It's not just a flat cover. It's got some raised portions to it to give it that 3D effect. And it shows him fighting Santuan, which really makes this a more iconic cover than the previous two covers that I showed, covers B and C, because he actually is in conflict mainly with Santuan and, of course, Santuan's employer, Darren, during the course of the book. And so the only thing that I think I would find fault with is the fact that Santuan is drawn so large on the page, that may be accurately large, but that the characters are drawn so large that the logo is practically blanked out. I mean, for all I know, this means is 160M as opposed to ISOM. So that would be my only real complaint about this. Now, of those four covers, which one represents the contents of ISOM number 1 the best? Well, like I said, the cover A does it hands down. I mean, you've got Santuan, you've got Darren, you've got ISOM, you've got examples of his strength. It's just practically a perfect cover, I got to tell you. And then you've got the ISOM cover D, where Santuan is featured on the cover, and this is the main character with whom Avery comes to blows within the book. One of the secondary characters whom he comes to blows with is Yaira, but then there's the Alpha Core, whom he only interacts with when he gets carried off to the hospital by them. I mean, that after Yaira kicks his ass, basically. So there's nothing that is really an iconic representation of the book in that particular cover. So which did he pick for the mass market cover? Did he pick the one that more accurately represents the books? No, he went and he picked the one that least accurately represents the books, which makes me wonder, what the hell? I mean, if he actually cared about the representation of ISOM number 1 by the cover, then why would he pick the cover that least represents what's actually in the book? It just doesn't make any sense. So, I can't explain it, really. Well, I might have an explanation for it later in this video, but just looking at from what he had earlier said about how he believes that ISOM number 1 will be represented by its mass market cover, to pick the least representative comic just seems weird. It seems contrary to his own purposes. Or maybe it's a mistake that he now recognizes and hopefully has fixed with ISOM number 2. Let's take a look at the covers for ISOM number 2 now. ISOM number 2, we were initially offered these 3 covers, and all of these covers were actually limited edition covers. We were told up front we would not get the mass market cover until later. But let's still look at each of these covers in turn and see which of them best represents the book. So we've got the first cover, cover A, and here we have ISOM fighting the new character Shadron, or Chadron. I don't know whether that's supposed to be a soft sh or a hard ch. So I'll try and kind of medium it out. So the character Chadron, and you've got the question on the cover, why did ISOM quit? And then you've got featuring the first appearances of Sydney Bloodruth, Gooding, and Shadron. And you've got this Rippaverse code of ethics symbol and this iconic stamp up in the top left. This is all very much a flashback to Marvel Comics back in the day, when you had things like the Comic Code Authority, where you had a picture of the character up in the upper left-hand corner all the time. And you had words on the cover where you actually asked questions. In fact, Marvel took advantage of this whole flashback motif and used it for a whole month-long event called Flashback, in which they did exactly the same thing. They put the Comics Code Authority on their books again, which they hadn't done in a long time. Then you had the old Marvel Comics group and the picture of the character, and then you had questions on the cover like who, why, when, what. And those were real covers back in the day. And so this harkens back to that old time and basically says we're going to be looking at the past. We're going to be looking into ISOM's past and the reasons why he quit superheroing. And we're also going to get some characters introduced in the book. So, this is actually a really, really good cover for the book. Now, the second cover is Ethan Van Sciver's cover. I mentioned this cover a little bit in one of my previous looks at ISOM number 2's campaign, especially about the campaign page. And I want to like this cover, and I almost do, but I have a couple of problems with it. Number one, I mean, it may actually represent, assuming that we get anything about who these weird insect/monkey people are, in the book. I mean, it may be representative of who or of what is going on in the book. And of course, we've got Sydney Bloodruth on the cover, which is helpful because we know that she is going to be in the book. But there's a couple of things that I don't like about the cover. One thing is that ISOM looks over muscled, especially around his neck. He looks like he's got practically an airplane pillow of neck muscle around him. And it makes it look like he is, just wearing a muscle suit on top of his regular muscles. And I just feel like that's too much musculature for him compared to what he's been represented in the comic before. Now, the other thing is that they both look bored. I mean, seriously, they are under attack by multiple creatures, and they look bored. I mean, I found out later from Ethan Van Sciver that he prefers to draw characters in a stoic fashion. But when you're under attack, you don't look stoic. Not unless you're really under no threat whatsoever. And if you're under no threat whatsoever, why should we care about you? That's the thing. It's like, remember what I said. Boring covers don't sell, exciting covers sell. So you want to have a cover. Now, of course, the cover's sold out just as much as the other one has. So, I kind of chalk that up to the fact that people are buying these in multiple quantities, and so they're all getting the and then people have their own preferences of maybe they don't appreciate the flashback ones like the way that I do, so fair enough. In fact, this was actually the cover that I first considered until I saw that big strip of neck bacon behind ISOM's head, and I'm just like, I can't do it. But you want your reader to be excited by your cover. You don't want your reader bored, and if your characters look bored, they're going to communicate that boredom to your reader. Now we've got Shane Davis's cover, and this was a foil cover that was actually offered at a $100 price, and that one's pretty much getting close to being sold out too, I think. And this one just basically has ISOM busting through a brick wall, and it's very low information, but that is because, according to Shane Davis, he didn't get very much information from Eric July about the contents of the book. He was like, well, can you tell me anything else about it? And Eric July just basically said, I'm just going to keep it all close to the vest. And so Shane had to do what he does, and that put together a pretty impressive picture of a guy busting through a wall. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad cover, but it's very, very low information and maybe doesn't at all represent what's going on inside the book. Now, of these three covers, which is the one that represents the interior of the book the most? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that, again, cover A is the winner. You've got the flashback motif, which says that we're going to be looking back into ISOM's past. It actually spells out that we're going to be looking at why ISOM quit. And then it gives us this announcement of more characters that are going to be introduced, including the character Chadron on the cover. So that one is clearly the one, and that is the one that I will be buying for my reading copy. Now, as you know, I happen to have recently destroyed a copy of ISOM #1 because I needed to get scans. I will be purchasing an extra copy of ISOM #2 in order to get scans, and the cover I will be getting for that is this one. Why? Because when Ethan Van Sciver talked about my complaints about the cover, he called me wrong. Yeah, you shouldn't have called me wrong. Yeah, one of your babies is going to get the consequences of that. That's going to be satisfying. So anyway, those are going to be the two comics I buy, one for consumption, one for destruction. All right, but the mass market cover is the one that we see right here. This was the one that was released as soon as 25,000 copies of the others were sold. And this is showing Chadron as kind of a spectral image in the night sky, along with ISOM apparently doing some sort of rooftop patrol. And you've got this humongous ass moon that isn't even remotely that size on any day of the year. Oh my God. I know Todd McFarlane made this kind of thing popular back in the day, but come on, can we please have a little bit of accuracy here? Unless, it just so happens in this universe that the moon actually is that close to the Earth. But holy God, people! I mean, you know, if you ever look up in the sky and you see the moon that close, just kiss your ass goodbye. You're dead. Oh, just don't rent that stupid movie Moonfall. I could tell from the trailer that that thing was going to suck. Um, anyway, so this is a fairly good representation in terms of, I think this shows Avery at a time of his superheroing when he was in the past, and it also shows the reference to Shadran up there, who apparently was a key figure in making him want to quit back in the day. So this is kind of a halfway bridge between a poster shot like Shane Davis's cover was and a real representation of what goes on in the book. So, which cover of ISOM number 2 represents the interior contents the best? Well, of course, I believe that the flashback cover is the one that does the job best. But after that, we've got the mass market cover. And then we have Ethan Van Sciver's cover, since it introduces Bloodruth, as well as showing ISOM fighting some monsters that maybe they'll be encountering in the book. We're still not quite sure on that. And then we've got Shane Davis's cover, which is very, very low information, practically no information. And it also has the issue of blocking the logo. Seems to be a habit here. Now, this would have been the most representative of ISOM number 2. Instead, we went with the second most representative. So his judgment, I would say, is getting better. Not perfect, but it is better. Now, let's get back to Joe Quesada, Mr. Who Cares Quesada, because I would be remiss if I didn't explain what his rationale was for the covers. See, when I told him, I looked at this and said, I see fail after fail after fail after fail, because I'm looking and I'm seeing little to no information about the character or about the story that's going on in the book. What he told me his rationale was is that he's not looking to communicate to old readers or returning readers. He was wanting to draw in new readers, people who had no or little to no information about the characters or the books. It's better to attract new readers who will become repeat readers than it is to get an old reader back. His theory was, and it's kind of slightly accurate but slightly not, that if you're reading the book, you're going to read the book no matter what's on the cover. Okay, fair enough. Although I will say I was getting more and more turned off by the Spider-Girl covers to the point where I did stop reading the book. But if you are and also he would say that if you had already dropped the book, then he didn't believe that there was anything you could put on the cover that was going to get you back into the book. Now, I think that's just patently. I can think of plenty of times. I can think of the time with the cover Ezekiel that I was showing you on Amazing Spider-Man 33 that actually got me back into reading Amazing Spider-Man for quite some time. So it is possible for the cover to both turn off a collecting reader and to also bring back in a former collecting reader. So I don't agree with him on his assessment. But his interest was more in the no to little information reader who was just coming to the rack and was trying to figure out, what am I going to try next? And in those cases, he wanted something on the rack that was just going to pop. He wanted something that the reader would see, and it would leap out at the reader and grab the reader's attention. And that was going to be a cover like one of these. Now, he also said that Marvel was outselling DC at the time, so how could my complaints make any sense to him? And, I can understand that. The money talks more than my complaints do. But I couldn't honestly say whether or not it was actually the covers that were doing the job. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he could know. So, but it was nothing that I could argue with him about. But the point is that when he's looking at a page like this, he doesn't see fail after fail after fail after fail. What he sees is pop after pop after pop after pop. He's going to see covers that are popping out at the reader and making that and grabbing their attention so that they'll pick up that book when they just have a couple extra bucks. And that means he's going to get kid after kid after kid after kid hooked on Marvel Comics if he can get their attention. Because the child, especially, is going to be looking for the flashiest picture, and that is what he wanted to bring in with these covers, is kids. So, when we're looking at this question of which cover represents ISOM number 1 the best, maybe we're not asking the right question. That's a very real concern, because if you want to look at this issue of which cover is best through Joe Quesada's eyes, you're not really going to ask which cover represents the contents of ISOM number 1 the best. You're going to ask which cover makes ISOM number 1 pop out the best. And I believe that in this case, it's that one, the cover D. However, cover D was not made available until much later. So of the 3 covers that are remaining, which is the cover that makes ISOM number 1 pop out the best? Well, I have to admit, I think it's the mass market cover that they chose. So mass market cover C, despite being least representative of the actual contents of ISOM number 1, is the one that tends to pop the most, because you've got not just one character on the cover, but 4, and in such a way that you see them fighting, and that kind of just puts you in the immediacy of their supposed conflict, which isn't actually in the book, but how do you know? If all you're doing is wanting to attract the reader who is no to low information with a cool cover, maybe this is the one that you go with. So maybe he had the right idea by making this the mass market cover. Same thing for ISOM number 2. Which one of these, instead of representing the contents of ISOM number 2 the best, which one of these makes ISOM number 2 pop out the best? Well, in this case, it's the Shane Davis cover, because number 1, foil, and number 2, I mean, he's busting right through the wall right at you. So this is the one that's really the main draw. However, it's a $100 comic. That's going to put it out of reach, and moreover, it was already established as a limited run comic. But still, $100? Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So of the 3 that remain, which one pops out the most? Well, maybe it is this one. Maybe this is the one that would pop out the most on the shelf. And so maybe the reason that Eric July's words aren't really being consistent with the idea is that he's actually judging things according to the Joe Quesada strategy, as opposed to the, I guess I could call it the Mike Partika strategy, which who knows if anybody pays attention to that, of representing what's in the book. Yeah, I can't tell, because I can't read Eric July's mind. Maybe somebody will ask him this, but I don't know. I mean, maybe this is the thought process that he went through, was Joe Quesada's thought process of make the covers pop out. So this almost made me want to turn this discussion into ISOM and the Secret of Great Covers, as opposed to just the secret as in one. Make it ISOM and the Secrets of Great Covers, because not only do you have my prime directive, where you make the cover an iconic representation of what is in the book, but you also have the Joe Quesada strategy, where you're looking for the cover that's going to pop out the most. But there's just one more thing, in the spirit of Detective Columbo. That really shows my age, doesn't it? There's just one more thing that bothers me, though, and it's something that I didn't realize. I was going to really stop the presentation here, and or on the previous screen, and just let it go. But there's one more thing about the covers that I noticed right at the last moment that bothered me on some of them, and even on some of the covers that I liked. This strategy of making the covers pop at the reader, this is something that applies to someone walking into a retailer store. You're looking for the low to no information voter, the low to no information reader who has no idea about comics and is just looking to try something, or has no idea about what's coming out now. Maybe this person read comics in the past, or maybe it's a child who just doesn't have any information at all, and you're wanting something that pops out. But here's the thing. Where is ISOM sold? It's sold online. It's really not sold on the retailer stands. And so this strategy, to me, does not make much sense if you're not selling in a marketplace that involves walking into a store and having to choose from among the various offerings out there. I mean, the price of ISOM number one is going to make that prohibitive just in the extreme anyway. But the idea that you're expecting your cover to make it pop off the shelf as if it were one offering among many, many more lower priced offerings, that doesn't really strike me as a rational strategy. And moreover, some of the covers are not actually suited to attracting the new reader, or at least they're not structured as well as they could be. For example, let's take a look at the ISOM cover featuring ISOM fighting Yaira. Now remember, according to the Joe Quesada theory, this is supposed to appeal to a low to no information reader, which means that low to no information reader is going to lack information that you and I have, that you and I had even at the time that we were looking at the website. Maybe this person's never even seen the ISOM website. So let's say this person says, she shows up at the comic book dealer one day and sees ISOM number one sitting on a shelf. What is the first question that reader is going to ask, having no or little to no information about ISOM? Which of these characters is ISOM? That's a real question. I mean, ISOM isn't exactly a masculine or a feminine name, so either of these two characters on the page could be ISOM. We don't know that the character on the left is Yaira, not unless you've encountered that character in some media before. And the same goes for the Alpha Core cover. ISOM, is that the name of a team? Or is it the name of a single character? Maybe all the three of those up above are ISOM. And then they're attacking some poor black guy on the ground like, George Floyd. And how is the reader supposed to know? You don't even know honestly, you don't even know if the ISOM is the name of either the team or the single character. It could just be the name of the book, which means something. Maybe it's the name of the city. Maybe it's the name of the world. Who knows? You don't really know anything about that. You just have ISOM, number one, and a picture of some characters fighting. Likewise, this cover with Santuan, which blocks off the logo so you can't even see that it says ISOM. Who's ISOM on this one? Santuan is the character who's featured most prominently on the page. Does that mean he's ISOM? He could be. You don't know. No, how do you know? So there's a lot of confusion in these particular covers. That's why having a number one cover like this is so valuable. This is I can't say it often enough. This is a perfect number one cover because you've got the actual character featured prominently on the page, leaping right out at you practically, and then you've got the subordinate characters in the background as well as scenes from his life, etc., etc. This is a great cover for the reader just coming in and saying, what is this book about? Because you can kind of tell a little bit here. He's going to get in conflict, probably fisticuffs, with the guy on the left. He's probably in some sort of conflict with the guy on the right. And other than that, he just looks like he's a strong character. And called ISOM. And that's all you know, but, for a first issue, that's still pretty good. That's pretty good information. Now, this is actually really easy to fix. And I wonder, can you guess how that you could fix this really easily? Well, by putting a little bit of more information on the cover. And remember, this is not information. Some people are going to complain like, oh, you just want your hand held. Shut up. Do you think he doesn't want you to know that that's Yaira? That's not a secret that he's been hiding. You go to his website and he'll tell you right out that that's Yaira. So just put this on the cover. ISOM versus Yaira. And now you know who's who. Because the blue corresponds with her blue. And now you have the identity of both of these characters. And then same thing goes for the Alpha Core cover. In this case, you would want to say ISOM versus Team Alpha Core. Because you want, in this case, you don't know whether Alpha Core would be the name referring to the team or referring to him specifically. Because if ISOM is the team name, well, then you're equally confused. But if you say versus Team Alpha Core, then you know that the three people up in the sky are Alpha Core. And then you're not confused anymore about who is who. You're not confused about the fact that ISOM is the guy. Now, I tried applying this to Santuan, and the problem is that Santuan is such an indeterminate name as ISOM that I just don't even think this will work. You know, ISOM versus Santuan, but unless there's some logo that you could really connect with Santuan, and he's not a team, so he's an individual character. So just putting ISOM versus Santuan on the cover isn't going to work. And I was trying to think of something to put on there like ISOM versus security guard Santuan or ISOM versus Santuan the security guard, and it just sounds dumb. So I don't think there's really any helping this cover, unfortunately. Now, last thing, let's take a look at this flashback cover, and I want to offer up one complaint. Down at the bottom, we see the yellow blurb featuring the first appearances of Sydney Bloodruth, Gooding, Shadron, and presumably this guy. Because why should we think this guy has any of the names in this box? Seriously. I mean, I was surprised to find out that this is actually Shadron. Because Shadron's name is not singled out in any particular way on the cover here. He's just there. He's on the cover, and we don't know that he's one of the names that's mentioned down here. And we wouldn't even know which of these names he's mentioned as down here. I mean, for all we know, he's Sydney Bloodruth. Why not? I mean, it sounds like a girl's name, but it doesn't have to be. Gooding? I mean, maybe. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I mean, it doesn't feel like there has to be any particular logic to how the naming goes. I mean, none of these names are particularly significant in any way that I know of. So how are we supposed to know that that's Shadron there? You know, so here is how I would have done it, and I think this would have been the correct way to do it, is to say, featuring the first, have this box up more towards the top and saying, featuring the first appearances of Sydney Bloodruth, Gooding, and then in a box down here, say, the Fury of Shadron. So that we know that this is Shadron, or at least we have good reason to believe that this is Shadron, because he's obviously showing some fury here at ISOM, you know, is battling with him. So that would separate out Shadron's name from the rest and indicate to us that he is actually the person on the cover here. So, yeah, that is my discourse on covers. I had to throw in those last little details because, you know, I just spotted them and realized, oh, yeah, those are problems. They're not daunting problems, but at the same time, just a little bit of a fix would have made those covers that much better. So I hope you have learned something from all of my discourse on cover art today. My name is Mike Partika. Please do subscribe and like this video if you found it valuable. And hopefully you will be along for the ride when I tear into ISOM number 2, literally in the case of Ethan Van Sciver's cover. And other than that, I will talk to y'all later.